the Bible. See, you have to understand something about circumcision because circumcision isn't talked about much in the church. Generally avoided. So when the circumcision is talked about a lot, we still should understand what circumcision is and why circumcision was required, whether you choose to do it or not. Although it was under the laws of the Old Testament, it was actually one of the first laws of the Old Covenant. See, when God came to Abraham and he made these promises to him. And when God makes a promise to you, the same way Abraham required for God to show him his promise by God telling him to go collect the animals and split them in half. Similarly, the same way Abraham wanted God to show him a way of his promise of his blessing. So God had him to go collect the animals and split them in half, because when you make a covenant, you have to shed some blood, and he split them in half and put Abraham to sleep, and he came through as a stove and a torch, showing a guiding light, but also this could be a path of destruction if you choose not to follow it the right way. But he's also showing his power and his might in that guiding light. But blood was shed and he sealed that covenant. So with him sealing the covenant, you have to understand when it came to circumcision, there was a reason that he told Abraham to go home and circumcise his family, because it was the first of those laws and it was identifying God's chosen people. But you were shedding their blood by cutting away of something. What you had to cut away was the filth and the sin that was passed through Adam and all of his generations. So when you circumcise yourself, you remove the foreskin, which is shedding of blood, which is part of the blessing and the curse. That's how Jesus became the curse for all of us. So cutting that foreskin will seal the covenant of being God's people by cutting away the filth of sin. So when you cut away the filth of sin, you're cutting away that curse for Jesus to be that filth and the sin by cutting away your foreskin. So when you cut away that foreskin and transfer that curse and that burden to Jesus, as you being God's chosen people, you have to understand why that was one of the first laws that identified his people, because also it was one of the first signs of Jesus being the curse for you and I. That being said, with Jesus being one of the first signs of the curse for you and I, we also have to understand now that when Jesus gets circumcised himself on the 8th day, the shedding of blood becomes his suffering. Shedding of blood on the 8th day becomes his suffering. For 30 some years, he goes through the rest of his life from that 8th day of birth, suffering for everything that we have done, those that come to pass, those that come in the present, and those that come after us. He begins that period of suffering until he makes it to that cross, which that's the part of the blessing of circumcision, till he makes it to that cross, bearing all the foreskins of sins that we have cut away from ourselves so we could get God's grace. And he gets on that cross and he bears the burdens of all of us and all the suffering to shed blood once again so we could be a part of God's chosen people. See, when God says to cut away that foreskin, you have to cut away that sin. So you have to understand the circumcision. So when you come into the New Testament, you understand when they say circumcise your heart, that means cut away that flesh that's in your heart that's taken over, which is the law of righteousness, which are the 613 laws that actually keep us in the requirement of sin, because it's a righteousness of God and only God could perform it. That's why Jesus, who is both human and God, was able to fulfill the law, the only one who could fulfill the law. And you have to understand that he gave us a credit by fulfilling the law because we had a debt, but he put on our bill a credit and said paid in full for everything that I done and you done in the past, the present, and the time to come, paid in full. All you have to do is have a circumcised heart so you can accept him. That's why I say the Old Testament is actually a set of external laws that was keeping us unrighteous. See, when God came back to set the law, he wanted to show us something, show us the law so it could reveal sin. It's a sin to murder thy neighbor. It's a sin to covet what thy neighbor has. It's a sin. He was showing us how sinful we were. He was choosing to reveal sin unto us. That's what that law was. But when you see that law, it's supposed to reveal to you how sinful you are. That's the propitiation there. The propitiation was the sacrifice of Jesus Christ on that cross, shedding blood, opening a path for you and me to righteousness to reign internally, because now the Spirit can be in you, but you need to have a circumcised heart. I know this is going to catch you off guard, but I want to explain to you why the circumcision of a foreskin actually applies to the circumcision of a heart. Your heart needs to be circumcised so you can understand how the old covenant is external and the new covenant is internal, because if your heart is not circumcised, you cannot accept Jesus Christ. So you may think the circumcision of the foreskin don't matter, but I'm here to tell you it does.